Seasonal allergies are about to hit their peak if they haven't already. Where we are in the southeast, everything is coated with a thin layer of yellow pollen right now. Stuffy noses, sore throats, irritated eyes, and fatigue are all common for seasonal allergy sufferers.
But could those seasonal allergies also be aggravating your mood? In today's episode, we're explaining the very real connection between seasonal allergies and mental health. Let's dive in.
So Carolyn, I have to admit this now that we are completely prepped for this new podcast episode that we're running. When you first suggested this, I think my this isn't going to work out radar started going off. And it wasn't because I didn't have faith in you. It was because everything that I've researched in the past around seasonal allergies is that when you talk about like homeopathic type remedies, they're not that effective or even legitimate. And there's a lot of suggestions of things to do that just flop. So when you said that you wanted to talk about seasonal allergies and how it affects your mood, I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be talking anecdotally about how people are sad when they have seasonal allergies. But you proved me wrong.
Maybe eating some local honey might help your mood.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid that you were going to come to me with. I was like,
No.
oh no, Carolyn, this was also after you went and had your naturopath appointment. And so I just thought, oh no, here we go. Not that naturopaths are not credible, that they are, but
She didn't try to push any local honey on me.
still,
For the record.
I was like, oh no, Crunchy Carolyn has emerged.
No. And this is one that came as a surprise to me. And I wasn't sure there was anything there. Because let's be honest, we have a lot of ideas.
We
Some
do.
are our own personal theories about things related to mental health. They're just ideas we have. And then we dig a little and we're like, have to be like, there's not enough there. So I can't remember what caused me to start looking into this. But I was prompted to do it pretty quickly since I think I had the idea in March. And I was like, oh, if we want to do this, we need to do it soon.
Yeah, we need to do it soon because the pollen is everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So, but gosh, once I started looking into this and then I shared it with you, I was like, oh my gosh, why is nobody talking about the impact that pollen and seasonal allergies have on your mental health? Because there's a huge connection.
There's a huge connection. There's some really interesting statistics. But also, right before we started recording, we were talking about why do allergists and dermatologists, why are they not screening for depression?
Yeah, because they should be. Because a lot of times, your allergy, your signs of an allergy, and then your eczema and those kind of things.
That's where they're seeing them in that office,
Yeah.
and that's where it starts. And then as we'll get into it for listeners, is that then it just, from there is when it progresses to potentially be a mental health condition.
Well,
in addition to.
Well, and also, people are a lot more likely to go see a dermatologist usually. You don't really think twice about that.
No.
But
no, and when you get to a certain age,
or
you're going there all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this connection though, I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? Now I think, can y'all understand why in a second? Now I think about everything I smell or breathe.
I know.
And y'all understand why in a second. But okay, so I found back in the 1930s, doctors were talking about it. They called it allergic toxemia. And I felt like I could really relate to this because, let me find it in my notes. They've said when people had like seasonal allergies, these people described being fatigued, slowed thought process, pure memory, irritability, and depression, and their sleep was interrupted. And I thought, that's me every time I get a sinus infection or with seasonal allergies. Fatigue, especially slowed thought process.
Yes. Well, and irritability when you're constantly like stuffed up or sneezing or your eyes are watery and itchy. I mean, you're irritable, understandably so.
Yeah, and we are going to talk that. They called it a nuisance disease, kind of your reaction to seasonal allergies. But that does play a role. There is more of a chemical and biological role, but that just dealing with that junk plays a role in your mood.
Yeah. Well, thank you to the doctors in the 1930s who coined the term allergic
I'm
toxemia.
sorry you died without anybody doing anything with all this.
Yes.
And now we're having to bring it to the public.
Exactly. Which we love doing.
Okay.
So today we are talking about seasonal allergies. More specifically, we're really honing in on allergic rhinitis, aka hay fever, and that's because it is the most common.
It's the most prevalent or common way you see allergies in a population. You know, you can have all kinds of allergies, but allergic rhinitis is, I guess, the most common or most prevalent way that it comes out. Like, does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
So statistically speaking, 15% of the U.S. population has been diagnosed by a physician, but that, like with many things that we like to talk about on this podcast, is very likely an underrepresented figure.
Right. Very underrepresented. Like, that doesn't include my diagnoses in there. Like, when I diagnosed you with stuff.
It's true. That's true.
But it's the most common chronic disease in children, which was kind of interesting. I thought chronic disease, but I guess so.
I mean, it is. If you think about it, if it rears its ugly head at least once a year, if not twice, if it comes back in the fall.
And it's the 5th most common one in adults. And so what we're talking about here, if you live in the South, I know everyone's like, you don't even have to tell us what you're talking about with allergic rhinitis. That stuffy nose due to congestion, or runny nose, post-drainal drip, where you start you have that post-drainal drip. Sometimes you can't even feel it in your but you know, like before going to bed, like, I'm going to have a sore throat tomorrow.
Yes.
And there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Nothing you can do. You want to do all the things.
Yeah. Red or watery eyes, sometimes maybe puffy or swollen eyelids, sneezing, but that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And a lot of times here, I know a lot of folks here in Birmingham, because the pollen is so bad in the Southeast, they will not actually really have allergies, and I fall into this category. I don't have seasonal allergies, but when the pollen is at its peak like this, I absolutely get headaches. Like in the afternoon, I'll get a little bit more of a headache. And I just had this conversation with my father-in-law yesterday.
You don't have seasonal allergies? Like when the pollen comes out?
No. But I will when the pollen is really high, like it has been. Yesterday, I worked from home and I sat on my porch for a good portion of the day because it was just so beautiful out. By about 4 o'clock, I had a headache.
Interesting.
Like a dull headache.
Okay.
So,
well, and allergic rhinitis is the main way we see it, or it's what affects most people. But also tied into this is eczema as well as asthma. So a lot of times if you have eczema, you may see that first, and then you get the stuffy nose, that kind of stuff, congestion. But they said a lot of people don't have the eczema, and they don't really know why some people get it with allergic rhinitis or hay fever. Let's call it hay fever. Some people don't. And then, asthma is also linked into there. So if you have allergic rhinitis, it significantly increases the probability of asthma. And it says up to 40% of people who do have hay fever or rhinitis will have asthma. So asthma and eczema are both tied in there.
so interesting.
Yeah. Remind me later. I got a eczema soapbox to get on. That could potentially be another episode.
Oh. See, here we go. We're generating more ideas. So we know now there is the seasonal allergies, right? And then there are other allergies that people may experience year round. Also, allergic rhinitis type symptoms, but the cause is something else, of which there is a list. But the point is that if yours are, perpetual throughout the year, it's not the same.
Let's break it down. So, we're talking about seasonal today, and pollen is a huge one, but also grass and, just as things are blooming, tree and grass pollen. Ragweed is a common seasonal one that you see. And the reason you usually see it in spring and summer and then a little early fall is I read a stat that pollen counts in the air are highest mid-spring to early summer. In fact, that's when 75% of the pollen spreading is done.
Wow.
I know. We're right in the midst of it.
We are dead center in it.
Now, if you have, maybe you just kind of have allergies all year round, and it doesn't seem to be necessarily worse in the spring or summer. That's what they call perennial allergic rhinitis, but that's going to be like dust mites and pet hair. They included cockroaches or mold or that kind of thing that just is there constantly. Right. So we're talking more about seasonal today.
So we've covered some stats. We've talked about the symptoms. We've covered the fact that we're not talking about perennial allergic rhinitis.
Let's stop trying to pretend like we're ENTs.
Exactly.
And explain to them why we are bringing up seasonal allergies. Yeah, seasonal allergies on a mental wellness podcast.
Good point. Good point. Thank you for righting the ship here. Okay. So allergies have been linked with anxiety and depression and even suicidal behavior.
Okay, and I kind of did the prep for this one, and it wasn't like a few studies linked it. It is a very pretty solidified connection. Wow. Which I was like, why? We feel pretty well versed. We may not know stuff, but we've heard of connections to mental health. But we really neither you nor I had really heard of this one. So I thought that was interesting. But yes, there's numerous studies that link it with anxiety, depression, suicidal behavior.
So explain this second bullet point, will you?
So allergic rhinitis or allergies is more prevalent in those who have depression and those who have a family history of depression. So we're talking mainly today about how seasonal allergies could worsen mental health conditions or, trigger some depression or anxiety, but they say it's kind of bidirectional.
I'm really loving that word because we've used that word with other things, and it's just...
This will make more sense.
It's a really good word.
This will make more sense when we explain how the seasonal allergies could cause depression.
Yes.
Because it has to do with inflammation. It's kind of almost like... I want to envision like a Ferris wheel. It's not that, but it's like once you get something going, like a snowball that just keeps getting bigger as it goes. Like once you have some inflammation, a little inflammation, then it's easier than...
It's like a bigger snowball that grows, and then as it grows, it picks up more snow. So as it grows, it starts to affect more things in your body.
Another way I've described it to people, since I do a lot with chronic inflammation, is it's kind of like, and I may have shared this with you, like once you've got a little inflammation, it's kind of like you've had like a bad morning, like something bad happened at the office or with work that morning. Well, you've moved on now, but the second half of the day, you're still a little like on edge, like, not on edge, but just kind of irritated from it. Okay. And so it's kind of like that when you have a little inflammation or your body's been irritated just a little.
Yep.
So it's almost hypersensitive now to other irritants, and it's easier for that inflammation to grow.
Got it. I think about it the way I've been thinking about my garden with these two sickly bushes that I have. Somebody said to me, they're like, well, they just weren't doing very well. And so then it became more likely because they were a little sickly to attract pests. And then they become sicker because now they've got like a pest on them. Anyway, so similar concept, right? Of you get a little bit and then it makes it easier for it to become a bigger thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've covered gardening and ENT and snowballs and bad mornings...
Let's keep going with seasonal allergies. So a pediatric diagnosis of seasonal or year-round allergies is predictive of an adult diagnosis of depression or bipolar disorder. One study, I thought this was interesting, found that children with symptoms of separation anxiety, which is considered a type of anxiety disorder, were more likely to have been treated for asthma and allergies compared to the kids their same age who didn't have separation anxiety.
That is so interesting.
I know. There's a significant association, this is from another study, between anxiety disorders and self-reported allergies. And then, there's data to suggest that pollen, so seasonal allergies, worsens depression in bipolar patients specifically during that high pollen season.
Which then, so you and I had previously been talking about like the idea of like when do some like when might suicide peak, when does depression jump up, and we had this conversation where I said I really think that that people can be more susceptible to having like a seasonal affective disorder in the spring.
You said that, and I didn't really believe you.
Yeah, see? Exactly.
But
I didn't believe you about the allergies.
You said, I swear I have read that suicide peaks in the summer, like in the early summer months. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't think so. Because I suffer more from seasonal affective disorder, and I'm like breathing a sigh of relief once we get like into March. And I'm like, okay, the world's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how? And then I love spring. And I was like, how could people not be happy in the spring? That makes no sense. But when I was researching this, it was linking, or it associated allergies as a possibility for why suicide rates go high. They peak every year. It's a recurring thing in spring and early summer.
Yeah.
Exactly when 75% of that pollen is coming out.
Well, and I had also said to you that anecdotally in people, in my world that I know suffer from different types of mental health conditions, that I have seen them struggle more in the spring. And I've gone through periods where I've struggled more in the spring than I have any other time of year. So that was really what piqued my interest. Then I got into the suicide rates, and I was like, oh, and now we're just building on it.
Well, I loved how I didn't believe you, and then I got into this research, and I was like, she was right. Oh, my gosh.
Yes. I love a convert.
So, and there are multiple studies to suggest that may be linked to like the seasonal allergies that are out there, the suicide rates. Mm-hmm. Not the total reason by any means.
No, but it
may be enough inflammation to kind of push somebody, maybe who had ideation of it,
to push
to
them
the next
over the edge. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk about why allergies may impact mental health. And this is where we really get into the fascinating and also slightly alarming connection.
This is where you're going to start thinking about everything you breathe.
You might want to actually put your mask back on. You might want to put your COVID mask back on. I might want to put my COVID mask back on.
Okay, so I'm assuming you want me to run with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
the main underlying reason is cytokines, which trigger inflammation. Okay, cytokines are inflammatory compounds that the immune system produces. So when the immune system senses, let's say pollen, it overreacts and it triggers a production of cytokines. It's overreacting because it's
like an irritant to your body.
Right. And it's acting like that pollen is a bacteria or a virus, something that it legitimately needs to get rid of.
Right.
But it's not. And so it overreacts and it produces these cytokines. Cytokines would normally go fight off that bacteria or virus that had entered your body or whatever's going on. And creates other other compounds that create inflammation. So when that happens, you have the stuffy nose and the red eyes and that kind of thing. But you've got that low-level inflammation.
Which, just as a reminder, that's not actually always a bad thing.
No.
Your body producing cytokines is a perfectly normal reaction, and in some instances it's really quite appropriate and helpful.
Like if you have that bacteria or virus, you want it.
Exactly.
Doing that.
But like you said, it has this overreaction if you are susceptible to pollen, right? It's it overreacts.
And people, I think, just because I work a lot with chronic inflammation, people seem to forget that it's an immune reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have allergies back to back or back constant, that starts overworking the immune system so that when you do have like a real bacteria or a real virus, you may be more susceptible to getting sick because your immune system isn't at 100%.
Which totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like all the puzzle pieces are fitting together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, so your immune system has inflammation. Well, the other thing we've got to consider, most of your mental health conditions have some inflammatory component. They're either precipitated by or aggravated. I'm not going to pretend. There's not data to suggest that depression or anxiety is solely caused by inflammation.
Right, but it plays a role for sure.
It definitely plays a role.
And like you said, it can precipitate or it can aggravate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
necessarily cause directly.
Yes. And research suggests that seasonal allergies and depression share some common, they called it mediators. We're not going to go into what that is, but so that it's kind of, I guess, let's call it the same inflammatory highways, if you will.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And in fact, what they have noticed is a lot of times the inflammatory markers, the neuroinflammatory markers that you observe, like with seasonal allergies, are also some of the same ones you see with depression.
Yeah.
So they're very interconnected, and this is what I was talking about, the bidirectional. So if you've got inflammation from depression, and that's inflammation in the brain mainly,
right,
then that may make your brain a little more sensitive, or immune system a little more sensitive to, you may be a little more reactive to those seasonal allergies. And then you've got this big snowball of inflammation.
Yes.
Or vice versa.
That's what I say, or the other way around. You may have seasonal allergies and then you raise your risk of having depression.
Yeah. Now, you ready to get real?
Yeah, this part is really going to blow reader or listeners' mind. So if you kind of just tuned out for a hot minute, this is the part where you really want to come back and focus. And also, if you're anything like me, you might want to go find after this where your KN95s are that are collecting dust, because you don't have to be wearing them on planes and in Ubers anymore.
Yeah. So there is a nose-brain connection. I guess kind of like the gut-brain.
Yeah.
But this one's a little scary.
Why does the brain have to be connected to everything, Carolyn?
I don't know, but this one's like, I don't know. For some reason, this one hit real close to home. Or maybe it's because they're real close.
Because they're together. Just close in proximity to one another.
The nose-brain connection. And it says neuroinflammation. So inflammation in the brain that could be contributing to depression or allergies. Can occur through the passage of inflammatory molecules, like pollen, from the nasal cavity to the brain. And so when you breathe in something, things can very easily reach your nervous system and your brain and have the capacity to interact with neurotransmitters, their metabolism, their function, sleep, and behaviors. And that is kind of the methodology or the mode for how allergies, the nose-brain connection is how allergies appear to impact psychological health.
So here's what I'm envisioning in my mind. The yellow pollen is going up into my nose and then all the way up and then passing into my brain, and just, there's like a yellow film in my brain now.
Oh, I have much uglier. I think I looked at too many pictures. Well,
but this is where I then got really tripped up, in the sense that when you think, now I'm thinking about like everything that I smell. How is that impacting my
I'm
brain?
thinking about like potentially toxic stuff, like chemicals, like cleaning things.
Right, like what happens when you huff all that bleach?
I don't know.
I mean, it makes sense why huffing glue can get you high.
Yeah.
But also, again, not enough.
I haven't thought about huffing
in a long time.
I mean, I have never really contemplated it for myself.
I never contemplated it for myself. I just know people did it.
Yeah. But, okay, so, and we're not going to get into this, but if anybody, has a health or science interest, those inflammatory molecules cross the blood-brain barrier, which that is a big, big deal. The blood-brain barrier is like this extra layer around the really important parts of the brain, and it really doesn't let a lot of things through. But these things can get through the blood-brain barrier. So,
Whew.
okay, so it's largely inflammation through the nose. Or no, but that plays a role. But the other way that allergies impact mental health is just the fatigue and just the not feeling good. A study was talking about how it impacts your social life, your relationships, your interpersonal. It causes fatigue and loss of productivity. And this is where they referenced it being just like a nuisance disease, like a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Which can cause stress and lead to sadness. And stress can cause inflammation too, you know?
Right. It's, to me, it's very much like that. It's like you're feeling ill. You have like some like low grade cold basically that you're experiencing for weeks on end. And the first few weeks, not so bad. But then it really starts to wear on you. You're stuffed up. You're not sleeping great.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't want to be as social because you just don't feel well. And I mean, I think about the times when I don't know if this ever happens to you, but when I get really sick, I always inevitably, there's some point in my illness where I just have like a cry it out session. Like it's just, I get so sad that I'm ill and I just want to feel better that I just cry. And I watched that actually with Holland because Holland has not been feeling well for about a week now. And last night she just broke down. She's like, Mommy, I just want to go back to school and I want to see my friends and I want to get good grades. I'm a poor child's in the 3rd grade, but nevertheless, I'm like, don't worry about your grades right now, kid. But yes, and she just cried because she wanted to be able to do life.
Yeah.
And she's not been feeling well for like a week.
Well, it doesn't make me cry. It makes me mad.
Oh.
Like, because it's this kind of allergy stuff or sinus stuff, it's so subtle. It's not something you feel like you necessarily need to stay home for or go to the doctor. But you just don't feel like yourself. You're not thinking like yourself. You just don't really feel good, but it's not that bad.
Right.
And so after a while, it just makes me so mad.
I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
So you rage, I cry.
Well, and then we talked about the stress can lead to sleep issues. And then that opens a whole nother can of worms. Yes. Inflammation, but also, connections to mental health in other ways. And
you already feel groggy and now you're not sleeping great. I mean, it's just one compounding factor after another.
Yeah.
So overall big takeaway, right, is that the connection between seasonal allergies and mental health conditions, particularly depression, is bidirectional. So they can each
cause each other.
And the two main reasons that allergies impact our mental health is cytokines and inflammation, which, quick side note, I would like all of our listeners to just raise their hands. I wish we could see them if they actually know what the word cytokines is. And I think that more people do now because of COVID and all the talk about cytokine storms. But anyway.
Oh. Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. Just know them as inflammatory compounds the immune system makes. And initially, they're good. When they stick around, they're bad.
Right. And then the second reason is it leads to just fatigue and feeling crappy, and that just is a real
sick of it, and you can't be productive. That's probably what gets me mad.
Yes, can't be. I'm with you.
Yeah,
get real mad.
Yeah. So we don't have a lot of solutions for you here, but I think our real goal for this was more awareness.
Yes,
because if you already have some minor or major, mental health conditions, then this is a time of year to be aware. It's okay, if you notice yourself feeling worse, it may not be anything you're doing, or it may not be necessarily your medication not working. It may be seasonal allergies contributing some inflammation. And then, of course, always go talk to somebody or.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's just for me, I felt like it was just important to be aware, just of the connection.
Yeah, I completely agree. Awareness. I'm so glad you summarized it that way for listeners. Awareness was the goal. I also really appreciated the awareness part of it just as a parent with a kid who has been, more recently struggling with seasonal allergies. Then I'm like, I want to be more aware for her.
Yeah.
Pay better attention.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for enlightening us with this
the
amazing research.
I'm glad the episode panned out since you weren't sure.
I wasn't so sure. But it did, and it was beautiful. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, we'll be back next week.
Yep. See y'all then.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Happy Eating Podcast. I'm Brierley Horton.
And I'm Carolyn Williams. If you liked this week's episode, then don't forget to rate and leave us a review on iTunes. And be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a new episode.
We can't wait to have you back at our table next week for a brand new episode.
Bye! The contents discussed in the Happy Eating Podcast, such as advice, studies, text, graphics, images, and other material discussed or presented on the site or podcast, are for informational purposes only. Content is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional or other qualified health providers with any questions you may have regarding your condition. Never disregard professional advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on the Happy Eating Podcast.
If you are in crisis or think you may have an emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. If you're having suicidal thoughts, call 1-800-273-TALK, that's 8255, to talk to a skilled trained counselor at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you are located outside the United States, call your local emergency line immediately.